If your bass is getting lost in the mix, this video is your cheat code. I'm breaking down 5 pro-level mixing secrets that will give you punch, clarity, and definition without killing your low end. From compression tricks to creative distortion, these tips will have your bass cutting through any track like a knife. Before we do dive in, if you're looking to get your music professionally mixed or mastered, I offer a free mix review to help kickstart the conversation. Just hit the link below to submit your track. You can also book me directly or check out my vocal presets on my website as well. Let's go. All right, so the first and most common tip is to use compression. Compression will squash the dynamic range, so the notes that you're not hearing as much will come up, and the notes that you're hearing too much will be pushed down. I love to use 1176 compressor on just about everything, and on bass I tend to use a ratio of 8. Fast release, depending on the bass, you can sometimes have a little bit of a slower release. This one's a pretty fast song, so the release is fast. And then my attack is almost always at 3. It helps let the transients cut through, but while still clamping down on the rest of the tone. So first I'm gonna play this without compression. I wanna play all these examples with all the music going because that's how I feel you really hear whether something's cutting through or not. If I just solo the bass and put compression on it, you guys are just gonna hear a bass compressed. So I want you to be able to hear the difference when we turn this on in the full mix, which is the point of mixing anyway. So this will be first without the bass, and then I'll bring the compressor on, and you'll hear it just kind of pull together more. You'll start hearing more of the notes while the song is playing. By the way, this song is by this great band called Red Moon that I mixed and mastered a few months ago. Make sure to check them out. So without compression first. It's a birthday, it belongs to you. It's a birthday, it's all for you. Okay, so we hear the bass. It's actually coming through quite well, but let's turn this compressor on and hear the difference. It's a birthday, it belongs to you. And so what you notice is the bass just kind of pops out of the speakers a bit more. That's what compression a lot of times does. It just makes the bass just feel forward, and we're hearing all the notes a lot cleaner. You can hear the bass through the whole song. And that's why, 9 times out of 10, if it's a dynamic bass like this, a compressor will be the first go-to tool in order to bring that thing forward. Now, one caveat with compression and bass is a lot of times the low end frequency is maybe not the loudest, but with the most energy. So the compressor is going to attack that low end first. So always be careful, and this is more maybe for hip hop and R&B, that when you put a compressor on a bass, you don't lose too much of the low end because that can be a lot of the soul of the music. All right, so the second tip is to use distortion on the bass. I like to usually do this in parallel, so I will create, a send with a return and then put a distortion plugin on that. In this example, I'm going to use a newer plugin that I actually just reviewed. If you want to check it out, I'll put the link up here. It's the new Sans Amp by Audio Punks. This thing used to be in Pro Tools. Now they have it everywhere, so I can use it in Studio One. And the big thing they added was actually a mix knob with a phase flip, which is huge, so that you don't actually have to use it as a send. So just to make things simpler, we're going to just use the mix knob instead of a send on this. But adding distortion can not only make it stand out more and be more present in the mix, it can add an attitude. And this tip and all these tips work for, we're working on a rock song now, but I use this when I'm mixing hip hop, R&B, pop music. Distortion on the bass can make it just sound a little bit more forward, a little more aggressive, and it's a tool I love to use. So I'm going to play this first without distortion, and then we'll hit the distortion on so you guys can hear the aggressiveness and the fullness and how it cuts through more. It's a birthday, it belongs to you. It's a birthday, it's all for you. Lay here and cry, girl, let it flow. So you can hear how it changes the whole vibe of the song. It really cuts through. Now, maybe that's a bit much for what we're doing now. And that's what's great about the mix stop. Maybe for this song, I would have this more around here. and it wouldn't be so aggressive, but it would help make the bass cut through and add just a touch more attitude. Let's hear it with that and then without it. It's a birthday, it belongs to you. It's a birthday, it's all for you. Lay here and cry. So to me, that sounds more like it would fit with this mix, where it's just giving us a little edge and cutting through just a bit more, but not like overly distorted. And that's what's cool, especially for rock stuff. You can have a distorted, crazy bass guitar, and in some places that will work. For this song, we want a little bit cleaner, and I think this works better. But play around with distortion. You can do all kinds of things. Just distort the top end. That's something I'll do sometimes. Or just distort the low end. Play with it. You can get a lot of different tones out of your bass just with distortion. All right, number 3 is to just use EQ. And one thing I did when I first started engineering and mixing was if I wanted more bass, I'd turn the bass up. And all that was doing is just killing the voltage on my master. And yeah, it sounded more bassy, but it made everything else sound muddy. So if you are looking for more definition and more clarity from your bass, don't turn up the low end, turn up the mid-range. And I always find around 1K is a really good starting point for this, to make just those notes, the finger notes cut through, or on an 808 from like a hip hop track to make the tick cut through on that. So 1K area, play around with the EQ can be a great place to get more definition. So let's try that now. I'm gonna turn off my distortion box, and I'm just using the SSL, one of my favorite EQs, and we are boosting about 1.3 at like 9 dB. You can boost this as much as you want. There's no rules. But let's turn, this is the EQ on and off. I'm gonna start it with it off so you guys can hear it, and then we'll bring it on. It's a birthday, it belongs to you. It's a birthday, it's all for you. Lay here and cry, girl, let it So as you can hear, the slides coming through more, which is something you might not want, but all the different percussion-y kind of sound of that bass is coming through more now, and we can really hear the definition of all the different notes. Now, this is, yes, an extreme example. We're boosting it by 15 dB. That could work if you needed that, but you know, maybe where we started would have been more of the idea of getting that to cut through a bit more without being over exaggerated. Okay, so for the next example, this is actually if you have a bass that has too much of the treble, like we just added. Say someone printed the bass track for you with all that treble on it and it's cutting through too much. This is something I actually learned pretty recently, is to use a DSER on a bass. So if you have a bass that's too percussive, we can de-ess all those little ticks, all the top parts that's too much and cutting through too much, and it will help tame the bass a bit more, and you'll hear some more of the lower mids. Actually, sometimes what I'll do is if I need more definition, I'll boost a bunch of 1K and then put the de-esser after, just to get those extra parts that are cutting over too much. So let me show you. I'm going to audition this so you guys can hear what we're EQing. I'm using a FabFilter Pro DS. You could use anything. And, you know, the range that we're trying to control is 2K to, where we at, 5.4K. So yeah, let's audition this. We'll hear what we're doing, and then I'll turn it on and off so you can hear that as well. So hopefully you can hear that through the speakers. It's just getting those little clicks out, right? So let's hear it with it, then without it. And then we turn it off. It just really helps to get some of that over aggressive pick noise out of there, and just a little bit of that top that we might not want, kind of nasty sound. Using de-esser works really well for this, and it's one of my favorite tricks to use on basses that need it. All right, the last one is an oldie but goodie, and this is a trick I use on a ton of hip hop and R&B and pop music, and it is the old-fashioned R bass, made I think probably 20 years ago now, from Waves. And this, what it does, it's a subharmonic generator basically, so it will add upper harmonics of to the lowest note that you have. So a lot of times, especially on phones and small speakers, you can't hear the bass so much. So this can help give harmonics to the upper notes of that to make the bass cut through more and just make it sound way bigger and thicker. So this thing you're going to be a little careful with. I have it rather high right now just so we can hear the difference, but you can always dial back this intensity so it's not as strong. But we'll play the bass with it, without it, and then with it. It's a birthday, it belongs to you. It's a birthday, it's all for you. Let you cry, girl, let it flow. So now you can hear just those, especially in the lower mids, just come a lot thicker and start pushing through a lot more. So if you have a bass that's sounding kind of thin, this can be perfect for that. And also, like I said, 808s, stuff like that are like super low and don't have much mid-range built into them. This can be the trick to help make those cut through a mix. All right, so those are my 5 tips to getting your bass to cut through the mix more. Let me know what your favorite tips are in the comments below. And like I said in the beginning, if you need your songs mixed or mastered, hit me up at mixandmastermysong.com. Talk to you guys soon.